In 1933, a horrific act of racial violence shocked Maryland. George Armwood, a black man, was lynched in Princess Anne after being falsely accused of assaulting a white woman. The brutality of this event was staggering. A mob gathered, fueled by rage and racial hatred, dragging him into the streets. This atrocity was not an isolated incident. It was a part of a pattern of mob violence and lynching that terrorized black communities across America. Armwood's lynching drew national attention, but it was just one moment in a long history of racial injustice. Here's the thing. George Armwood was Maryland's last lynching victim in October 1933, but the horrifying details of his death highlight the pervasive racism that plagued Maryland. How could a community allow such violence to unfold? Why do we forget these painful moments? The truth is, history isn't just about events. It reveals the deep scars of systemic racism that continue to affect lives today. You need to understand these stories to grasp how they shaped our present. How many victims like Armwood remain unnamed and unremembered? The legacy of this violence calls for acknowledgement and justice. Comment if you feel this needs to be told. Share if you think stories of racial violence must not be forgotten. Follow to learn more about the hidden struggles of Black Marylanders. This history matters. Remembering George Armwood is essential to understanding the fight against racial injustice today.
White mob of 2,000 people lynches George Armwood in Maryland. On October 18, 1933, a horrifying incident unfolded in Princess Anne, Maryland. A mob of over 2,000 white residents brutally lynched George Armwood. Accused of assaulting an elderly woman, Armwood, who was intellectually disabled, faced a gruesome fate. After being arrested, Armwood was dragged out of jail, and an 18-year-old boy cut off his ear with a butcher knife. The mob then mercilessly beat him and hanged him from a tree. But the horror didn't end there. They cut down his corpse, dragged it through the streets, hanged it again, and finally burned it in public. The lynching of George Armwood sparked a nationwide outcry and demands for justice. However, investigations faced numerous obstacles and delays. Residents refused to identify participants, and black witnesses were mocked and intimidated. Frustrated with the silence, the American Civil Liberties Union offered a $1,000 reward to anyone willing to name the leaders of the mob. Even with identifying evidence, the county prosecutor refused to act. Finally, when the Maryland Attorney General ordered troops to arrest 8 named participants, white residents who supported the accused lynchers staged riots of protest. In the end, 4 white men were tried for the lynching and acquitted by all-white juries. This tragic event serves as a reminder of the deep-rooted racial inequality in our history.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to open up by giving all the praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Chakudash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who were well and preached the truth in true and sincerity. Shalom to the hopefully elect. And this is the brother Amawan Ayash from the GMS Indianapolis camp coming back at you with another quick lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. And today's lesson is going to be another installment of our camp series entitled For Thy Violence Against Thy Brother Jacob, which is directly quoted from the book of Obadiah, the first chapter, which is only one chapter. All right, the book of Obadiah, chapter 1 and verse 10. And in this series, we search throughout history and highlight events wherein Esau Edom, the so-called white man, has exacted violence upon our people. Our people, the Israelites being who? The so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. You see, and we're fastly closing in on episode 200 of this lesson series. And as we always say, we're barely scratching the surface. All right, Revelation the 18th chapter talks about that. Revelation the 18th chapter talks about how that the sins of this place have reached the heavens. You see, so ultimately, only the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, knows each and every single thing right? Each and every single manner of wickedness and evil, right, that Esau, Edom, so-called white man, has exacted upon his chosen people. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get to open the scripture in the book of Obadiah, chapter 1 and verse 10. It says, "For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever." So with everything, all right, that we've gone into so far, and multiple other elders and brothers, right, have gone into, right, the vile, evil atrocities that Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, has committed against us, right, the Lord's chosen people. All right, these are all charges against him and all reasons as to why the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is going to cut off the nation of Edom from being a nation forever. You see, that's the punishment that awaits Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, for what he has done unto the Lord's chosen people. All right, complete and utter destruction. You see? Let's go from there to the book of Isaiah, the 47th chapter. And verse 6, it says, "I was wroth with my people, I have polluted mine inheritance, and given them into thine hands." So we know that ultimately the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, all right, gave into the hands of these devils. And we know that ultimately we've been delivered into the hands of the heathens, beginning with Esau, even the so-called white man, all right, not for our destruction, all right, but what? Because we provoked the Most High by sacrificing unto devils and idols, as the book of Baruch, the 4th chapter, tells us. Excuse me. It says, "Thou didst show them no mercy. Upon the ancient hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke." And that's why the scriptures talk about the heathen, right, who will help for the affliction. You know, of course, us being in captivity and subjection under these devils, right, that's punishment from the Most High Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, all right, due to our disobedience. All right, but hey, even when we were given into the hands of these devils, right, Esau took it overboard. You know, did all kinds of wickedness. You know, buck breaking our men. You know, raping our wives in front of us. You know, feeding our babies to the alligators, right, and then so much more that this devil has to pay for. You see, it says, "Upon the ancient hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke." You see, the ancient even going toward the elderly of our nation. So our nation as a whole, right, from the elders all the way on down to the youngest, our Esau, Edom, and so-called white man has shown no mercy. You see, and that's why it says here in the book of James, the 2nd chapter, in verse 13, it says, "For he shall have judgment without mercy, that hath showed no mercy." So the judgment that the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai has declared upon Esau, Edom, and so-called white man, all right, when all is said and done, is that what? He's not going to receive any mercy. And why is that? Because Edom has never shown any mercy towards the Lord's chosen people. Okay, and when you read in the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary and you read the definition for Edom, what does it say? That Edom was the only neighbor of the Israelites not promised any mercy from Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. You see, and the whole book of Obadiah supports that. Which, once again, it's only one chapter. All right, but that chapter, right, is extremely powerful, man. Okay, because what? It goes into the downfall of a whole nation, right? The extermination of a whole nation, and why it's happening. It says, "And mercy rejoiceth against judgment." You see, so ultimately, anyone would prefer mercy over no mercy. Okay, and anybody would rather have mercy than to be completely eradicated. But guess what? Once again, all right, since this devil has shown no mercy, he's not receiving any mercy. You see, and we see that time and time again when we go through these various different events, right? Lynchings or whatever the case may be, when violence was exacted upon Israel. All right, there was no kind of mercy shown towards Jake. You see? All right, so as the headline of the article reads, it says, "Mob of 2,000 white people lynches George Armwood in Maryland." On October 18th, 1933, a mob of at least 2,000 white residents of Princess Anne, Maryland, beat, hanged, dragged, and burned George Armwood to death. Mr. Armwood, who reportedly had an intellectual disability, had been accused of sexual impropriety with an 80-year-old woman who was the mother of a local white policeman. You see, this is the same thing that went on in the last one I uploaded, man. You know, with the Jake Sam Bush. All right, it all started, all right, because of an accusation, all right, with the so-called white woman. You see, which ultimately, basically, man, all these reports and false accusations that you see placed upon Jake throughout history, man, they weren't true. They were false. You see, and a lot of times, right, it'll be the so-called white woman who's into the Jake man, but when they catch, when the so-called white man catches wind of the fact that she has something going on with the so-called black man, what does the so-called white woman do? Oh, he forced me. He did that, this, that, and the third. The whole time she was pushing on to the Jake, man. See, so it's the same thing over and over and over and over again. It says, shortly after being arrested, Mr. Armwood was dragged out of the jail, and an 18-year-old boy immediately cut off his ear with the butcher knife. The growing mob then beat Mr. Armwood nearly to death and dragged him to a tree where he was hanged. Afterward, the mob cut down his corpse, dragged it through the streets, hanged it again. You see, so they go into what? As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and get these scriptures, because obviously hanging them wasn't enough. See, or beating them nearly to death and then hanging them wasn't enough. All right. You afterwards, what? You cut down his corpse from the tree, dragged it through the streets, hanged it again, and then staged a public burning. So Esau went overboard, man. Since we quoted it, let's go ahead and get it. All right, the book of Zechariah 1:15. And I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease, for I was but a little displeased, and they helped for the affliction. So, of course, man, once again, as we established earlier, right, we were given into the hands of these heathens, right, due to our disobedience against the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. But this fucking devil, Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, all right, took it overboard. All right, the saying goes, man, give someone an inch and they'll take it a mile. That's exactly what Esau, Edom, and so-called white man did. And we're seeing, right, an example of that right here. All right, first and foremost, you nearly beat the man to death, and then you lynched him. Okay, and after he was dead, all right, you cut down the corpse. All right, took his body from off the tree, right? Dragged it through the streets like some fucking rag doll. Okay, then you hung it for a second fucking time, and then burned the man publicly. So this is why you motherfuckers ain't getting no mercy, man. Because y'all ain't shown no mercy to begin with. Let's go from there to the book of Amos, chapter 1, verse 11. It says, thus saith the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, for 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof. Because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity. And we see, right, these individuals completely casted off all pity, right, when we're dealing with this Jake man by the name of George Armwood. See, that's absolutely fucking merciless, man. To nearly beat him to death and then hang him, causing him to die. And after he dies, taking down the corpse from the tree, dragging it through the streets, hanging him for a second time, and then burning him for the public to see. That's absolutely fucking overboard, man. And once again, this is why Esau ain't getting no mercy. It says, because he did pursue his brother with the sword and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever. You see, and Esau's wrath is very much present to this very day. Okay, let's go from there to the book of Ezekiel, the 35th chapter. And I'll read verses 5 and 6. It says, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, and the time of their iniquity had an end. Therefore, as I live, said the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Excuse me. Since thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. You see, so ultimately all that blood of the Israelites that you spilled unrighteously upon this land is getting ready to come back upon your own head. You see? Reading on, it says, thus will I make Mount Seir, which Mount Seir is interchangeable with Edom, which, ultimately this judgment is coming to Esau as a whole, all right, in these last days, but especially, when the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai destroys, all right, Babylon the Great, aka America. All right, Isaiah the 63rd chapter, who is this that coming from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? Right, prophecy of our Lord Yahweh Shai coming back to a world ruled by Edom, right, which ultimately where is Edom's main dwelling place here in the land of America. All right, so that this land is what Yahweh Shai is coming back to destroy, man. Okay, it says, thus will I make Mount Seir most desolate, and cut off from him that passeth out, and him that returneth, and I will fill his mountains with his slain men, in thy hills and in thy valleys and in all thy rivers shall they fall that are slain with the sword. You see, so ultimately this is everything that's getting ready to come upon you because what? Of your perpetual hatred against the children of Israel. And like the Lord said, what? Since thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. Let's go from there to the book of Isaiah, the 14th chapter. I'll read verses 21 and 22. It says, prepare slaughter for his children for the iniquity of their fathers. Iniquity being sin upon sin upon sin. And what is the main sin, right, that you devils, you so-called white people have committed in the earth? Are all the persecution and evil that you've exacted right upon the Lord's chosen people. That's your number one sin, man. And ultimately all the wickedness, right, that you've committed in the planet Earth, man. Everything you've done to destroy the earth, man. All right, you got to pay for that too. But the number one sin, really, all right, what the worst thing you did, I was you made the Most High to look like a so-called white man, his only begotten son to look like a so-called white man, right? The angels, his chosen people. Okay. And what? All the violence you committed against the children of Israel. So it's a whole list of charges against you, right, that you are completely guilty of. And what is the end judgment? That you as a nation is going to be wiped out forever, man. It says, prepare slaughter for his children for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. For I will rise up against them, said the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, said the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. So what? That's the seed line. All right. Once again, as we've been going through it, all right, and saying constantly, which ultimately we're going to go back to the book of Obadiah to support this. And guess what? The whole seed line of Edom is going to be cut off, man. You see? So jumping back into the article, excuse me, Salaki. It says, afterward, the mob cut down his corpse, dragged it through the streets, hanged it again, and then staged a public burning. The New Journal Guide reported that men, women, and children participated in the savage order. You see, so ultimately, that's why, hey, we're not going to have any mercy upon anyone in the nation of Edom, right? They're men, they're women, they're young ones, right? Let's get this in the book of, what's that, Psalms, get two of them in Psalms, Psalms chapter 109, starting at verse 12. You know, my father always likes to get the scripture. And guess what, man? This scripture right here is very what's the word I'm looking for? All right, it ultimately it blends in with the topic. Because as we're getting ready to read, all right, Psalms 109 and verse 12 says, let there be none to extend mercy unto him. Why is that? Because this devil has shown no mercy unto us. Neither let there be any to favor his fatherless children. Let his posterity be cut off, meaning what? All generations, man, from the oldest to the current. You see, so ultimately we know that in the days to come, that the nation of Edom is going to be completely wiped out forever. It says, and in the generation following, let their name be blotted out. Let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered with the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Once again, the sins of this place have reached into the heavens. So the Lord hasn't forgotten anything, man. Right? Just like Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, has held his wrath against the children of Israel forever. Well, guess what? The indignation of the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, is upon the nation of Edom forever. It tells you that in the book of Malachi, the first chapter. I want to call us Edom, the border of wickedness, and a nation against whom the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai hath indignation forever. Right? It says, and let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Because what the woman of Edom, all right, they're not guilty either. All right, they're the head of these false accusations, right, that Jake suffered and led to the demise of Jake. You know, Jake being hung, being made a public spectacle. All right, as we read it right now, this man was nearly beaten to death, hung and killed, his body taken down from a tree, dragged through the streets, hung for a second fucking time, and they burned him in fucking public, man. You see, so these devils have entirely forwarded the affliction of our people with no regard or no kind of mercy at all, man. You see, so the whole nation of Edom is going to get it. Let's go from there to the book of Psalms 137. And starting at verse 7. It says, remember, O Lord, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, race it, even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewarded thee as thou hast served us. So what? Esau's going to reap what he sown. All right, all the evil, right, that he's committed towards the children of Israel, all of our blood that he shed is going to return back upon his own head. And of course, we're going to do it in righteousness because, well, we're not going to be, buck breaking the men of Edom like they was doing to our men. Absolutely fucking not, man. Okay, but best believe, man, hey, this captivity you're going to serve unto us as a Lord's chosen people, man. All right, us being the Lord's chosen people, all right, it's going to be complete hell for you, man. Because what? It's going to be twice as long, twice as hard. Right? Revelation 18 says what? Reward unto her double as she has rewarded thee. It says, verse 9, happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stone. So, hey, man, your little ones going to get it too. All right, just like you ain't show no mercy on our little ones, man, on our babies. All right, we ain't showing no mercy to yours, man. So let's go ahead and continue reading. It says the Afro-American reported that the mob danced around Mr. Armwood's charred remains. And it ain't even stopped after he was burned. So it just goes to show you how fucking vile and cruel these devils are. You see, and the Lord did indeed give us into the hands of a very perverse nation, man. A very evil, wicked, vile nation. So the report quoted one white man who said it would have cost the state $1,000 to hang the man. It cost us 75 cents. Says Mr. Armwood's lynching sparked a national outcry and calls for prosecution of the mob members. Slacking. Yet investigations at the county, state, and federal levels faced obstacles and delays. Inquiries following the lynching were marked by residents' refusal to identify participants, as well as mockery and intimidation of black witnesses. The American Civil Liberties Union, frustrated with the silence, began offering $1,000 reward to people willing to name the leaders of the mob. Even when finally presented with identifying evidence, the county prosecutor refused to act. When the Maryland Attorney General ordered troops to arrest 8 named participants, white residents who supported the accused mob members waged riots of protest. 4 white men were ultimately tried for the lynching of George Armwood and acquitted by all white juries. You see, so, hey, there you have it. As you can see, that's the end of the article. All right, very short, but a lot can be taken from that. All right, slack it 1 second. Hey, show them up. Yeah, I'm sure look at so anybody with you? Nah. Okay. Yeah, I was just finishing up a violence against our brother Jacob. So I was just finishing up a violence against our brother Jacob. So just bring out a couple more scriptures, and that'll be the lesson.
You was in the midst of it?
I'm at the end of it.
Okay.
But yeah, as you can see, all right, these Edomites, they committed evil against our people, and guess what? They're not in trouble for it. So once again, there's a lot that we can indeed take from this article. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a couple more scriptures, and that'll be the end of the lesson. Let's go from there to the book of Psalms, the 73rd chapter. And we'll jump straight to the point, starting at verse 5. It says, they are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. So even though 2,000 of these Edomites men gathered to brutally put to death this Jake individual, none of them got persecuted for it, man. See, and even the ones that they did bring to trial, the 4 white men that they did bring to trial, right, they were acquitted by all white juries. So once again, they're not in trouble as other men. Verse 6 says, therefore, pride compasseth them about as a chain, violence covered them as a garment. So them not being in trouble as other men, now they have the mindset to where they believe they can get away with any and everything. See, so therefore, their wickedness only grows further. Okay? And then I'll leave you with this. We'll jump back to the book of Obadiah, chapter 1 and verse 18. It says, and the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai has spoken it. And once again, this is all because, as you read earlier in verse 10, or for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. You see, so what the 12 tribes are going to gather together, and whatever's remaining of the Edomites, right, at the end of your 1,000-year period captivity, I guess where you're going to be rounded all together and burned to death. And there's not going to be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai has spoken it. Okay, so at the end of the day, it's determined. You see, and we already read it, Amos, that what the Lord said, he's not going to turn away the punishment thereof. You see? So I'm going to go ahead and close out right there. I pray that this lesson was edifying, informative, and informative to the elect body of the nation of Israel. And without further ado, I would like to close out by giving all the praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Hakudash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who were well and preached the truth and sincerity. Shalom to the hopeful elect. Lord, will I see you in the next lesson. Till then, I say shalom.